Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Talks Business. I'm here with my new podcasting BFF, Richard Citrin, and today we are turning the tables, and Richard is going to ask me some questions. I love doing these episodes. So if you're someone who listens and you would like to sit in the interview chair and have a conversation with me at some point on the podcast, shoot me an email, lisa@lisalarter.com, and let me know. And who knows, we just may select you for a conversation. So, Richard, I'm going to hand things over to you. Thanks for doing this.
Lisa, thank you so much. This is so exciting to do the Ask Me Anything with Lisa Larter. I'm really pumped about it. I've been drawing up my questions and reviewing websites and doing some deep research that I'm going to be sharing with you later.
Oh,
So I've got a bunch of questions, and then towards the end, I've got some rapid fire questions for you
okay, great. Let's do
that I'm
it.
going to put you through. But let's start with the most important things first. So, I was doing, as I said, I was doing some deep research, and I did some research about Wiener dogs at Westminster. Now, Westminster just finished up, and it turns out, of course, dachshunds are in the hound group, which I did not know. They've won the best in group, let's see, 8 times, 9 times. They've won the best in group. Wiener dogs have never won Westminster, but they were in the first class of Westminster, which was like 1877. Dachshunds, smooth dachshunds were there from the first year, and then there were several other breeds. So I think the audience really deserves to know, Lisa, why Wiener dogs, why dachshunds. You've had a slew of them, you love them, your business is named after them, and most of us just think of them as yappy little hot dogs. So why? How did you come to them? And I won't ask you your favorite because I know they're all your favorite. But tell us a little bit of the story of the Wieners, of the Dachshunds.
All right. So, when my husband and I first started living together, our first dog was a Jack Russell. And we loved our little Jack Russell, total high energy, great dog. We named him Pal. It stood for Paul and Lisa. And later on in life, we met another couple. My husband went over to their house while I was out of town on business, and they had a wire coat miniature dachshund. And he came home and he said, I met the sweetest little dog. You are going to fall in love. And we had tried to bring a second dog into the house, and our Jack Russell tried to kill it. He literally, the puppy went
Sounds
for
like a
his
Jack
frisbee.
Russell.
Yeah, the puppy went for his frisbee. He grabbed it by the neck and he started to shake it. So we, being inexperienced at how to introduce dogs, took it back to the breeder. So we go over to our friend's place. We meet their dachshunds, and I fall in love. This little dachshund, her name is Sadie. She's just cute as a button, sweet little dog. And I can see exactly why Paul says we need to have a dachshund. So we didn't get a dachshund right away. We owned a landscaping company at the time, and he went to knock on somebody's door one day. And when they opened the door, this Jack Russell came running to the door, and like 3 seconds later, this little miniature dachshund came running to the door. So of course he came home and told me the story about these people that were our customers that had a Jack Russell and a dachshund. So my girlfriend and I decided to just go look and see what puppies the breeder had. And she had 3 puppies. They were like 6 months old. They were rejects. They weren't good enough for her to show them. And I had looked at this one little boy that I really had my heart set on, and she let them all loose to play. And this little girl who we named Gretchen, she picked me. She'd go run, and then she'd come back to me. She'd go run, she'd come back to me. She'd go run, she'd come back to me. And the vet was like, she's got a bit of an overbite, and so she's not perfect. Are you sure you want her? I was like, you kidding? I love her. So we bring her home, and we still have this Jack Russell. So I still have this problem to overcome. And I decided that I was going to put a muzzle on him and bring him outside to introduce to the puppy. So actually, I didn't do that. I brought him outside without a muzzle, and he was like vipering at her, and she gave it right back to him. She was not intimidated. She was just like, no, 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 I am here to stay, and you're going to like it. So I brought them both in the house. I put a muzzle on him because I didn't want him to hurt her because she was a puppy, and I just let them loose. And he walked up to her and he literally took his snout and he just kind of punched her in the back hind quarter and gave her a little warning shot. And that was it. It was over. They were friends. No more trauma. But what happened in the years after, as our Jack Russell began to age, really made me love the breed even more.
Mm,
He lost his eyesight. And when I would take Gretchen out for a walk with Pal, she would grab his leash and she would guide him on walks. She was a Velcro dog. She had to be with you all the time. If people
mm,
come over to the house, you have to pick her up. She wanted to be up, at eye level with people. And I just fell in love with the breed. And
mm.
so the next one that we got was Eddie. And Eddie was, essentially a rescue. He had been adopted by a family that had kids, and I think he tried to bite the kid, and I think he got a really, really good beating because he was completely terrified of people and kids when we got him. But it's just been a love affair ever since. When Gretchen died, Sunshine kind of saved my broken heart. And I always wanted a dapple. And Eddie was getting up there in age. And so my husband and I decided that the time was right to bring another puppy in because we didn't think that Eddie really had that many years left.
Mhm.
And, it was the best thing we ever did for our senior dog because our little Faithy, she loved Eddie and did everything she could to try to make him love her. And so I
Uh,
just love the breed, the personality, and all that.
that's such a great.
And I will tell you, there is a thing you can buy. It's called Pet Corrector, and it's canned air. And that works really, really well to stop the yappiness.
That that cuts back on the yappiness. All right, that's okay. So I don't have that issue because I don't get, my wife kind of prohibits yappy dogs. But that's a good tip for those of you that have those small yappy dogs who I'm sure you love because they can sit on your lap and do everything else. So,
Mhm.
well, I just was looking, and the Wirehair did win win the Hound Group in 2012. So they have been in play. They have been in the competition there in the finals, and I'm sure one of these years they'll win.
Yeah, I was watching the show, the agility course.
Mm.
And I think Faith, our one dog, would love to do that. She loves to run and race. So I'm actually considering seeing if I can find a local place where I could take her to try to train her.
Now, do you have two dogs now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sunshine and Faith.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. It's a good way.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I think that's all I have to talk about. No, I'm just so so let's talk a little bit about this podcast because you've had some amazing people on this podcast, which is called She Talks Business, which I love because, as you know, I think men have been hogging the conversation around business for the past 5,000 years. So I think it's time for women to do it probably for the next 5,000 years. But what's the podcast's origin story? And do you think women need to approach business differently, or are you hearing insights from from your from all of your guests, men and women, who are speaking about any differences that women need to take in business, or is it really just a case of wanting to give more women opportunities to share their wisdom and knowledge about their business experiences?
Well, the whole idea behind She Talks Business was really I'm the she. I'm talking business with a variety of people. So I've had you on my podcast and you're not a woman. So I do think that women tend to do business a little bit different from men, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely different. I think some women are definitely more nurturing. They're more led by emotion and feeling in terms of how they run businesses, whereas a lot of men are more cut and dried in how they do it. But there are men that lead more with their heart, and there are women that lead more with their brain. So they're not absolutes. I just wanted to have conversations about business that could help people. And I know that I have men and women that listen to the show. I think that the podcast market is really saturated, and I get bored by a lot of podcasts when I listen to them. I feel like the hosts haven't really been super intentional about what they're talking about. And so I really wanted to do something that would be valuable for people and enjoyable to do. And that's why I changed things up. I interview guests, I have guests interview me, I have a a show I call it My Take, where I talk about a book or something that, kind of give my take on it. But my goal is always, what can I do to provide value to people who are running a business in as many different facets as possible? I talked to you about resilience. I've talked to people about mental health. I've talked to people about money. Like it doesn't matter what the topic is. It all is connected to running a business.
Right, right. It's interesting. I wonder, I've seen this evolution of women business leaders over many years now, and I think, I've seen a trend over particularly the last 20 years, where I think, maybe 20 years ago, you had a lot of women who were trying to imitate men
Mhm.
in their role as business leaders, and today you're seeing much more authenticity. I think primarily initiated, I think, more by women than men. But now I think men are kind of stepping up to the plate in part because employees are demanding it, customers are demanding it, and I think this is kind of a very powerful influence. Have you seen that in your career, that kind of shift? And do you see a difference between older women entrepreneurs and younger women entrepreneurs, or not that much?
Well, I will say that in the corporate world, I see a lot of women who are leading more like men, not always like men. And I think it's because in a lot of corporations, the leadership team and the executive team is all male dominated. So you're being taught leadership skills by men in leadership roles. And as more and more women get into leadership roles, I think you'll see that shift a little bit because women bring what makes them unique to the table. I think that the vast majority of leaders that I worked with in corporate were men. One woman that was a leader of mine for a number of years, Jackie Fu, who has been on the show, really, really shaped my leadership differently as a woman. And she did that because her focus was on what people were doing right instead of what people were doing wrong. And
Mhm.
so I think that a lot of times men want to fix a problem and women want to elevate people for doing the right thing. And that was a really powerful influence on my leadership. I
Mhm.
think you're bang on when it comes to being an entrepreneur. I think that women are more comfortable embracing who they are. I will say that at times, though, we women need to embrace the things that are uncomfortable for them in order to build more successful businesses. So,
What
a
would
lot
those
of
kinds of things be?
I think that sometimes women shy away from having difficult conversations. They're conflict avoidant. Now, I don't want to generalize and say all women are like this because, there are men that are like this too. But these are some patterns that I've seen in coaching and leading women. I've been in entrepreneurship. I've been self-employed since 2006. So in almost 20 years, I have observed some of these patterns. So conflict avoidance, it can be with their team member, it can be with a customer, it can be with a vendor. There's a discomfort around having a conversation that they perceive as being I'm looking for a word
Uh,
that feels
to
like a
deal with
con
to deal with conflict effectively.
yeah, to deal with conflict effectively, but sometimes it's not even conflict. Sometimes it's, just expressing a different perspective, or
Mm.
sometimes it's talking about something that's uncomfortable. They seem to dance around it sometimes. Women get a bad rap. When they are direct, they're typically called the B word. And when a man is direct, he's called a good leader, a strong communicator. And so I think women have almost shied away from being direct in their communication. Not all women, some women, because it hasn't always been appropriate. And if you look back at our career history, in a lot of cases, if you were direct and to the point in your job, you could lose your job. We didn't always have the freedom and flexibility that we have today. So that would be one thing. The other thing that I would say is understanding the financial side of business. Again, keep in mind for many, 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 many years, I mean, I think we are just around the corner of the 50th anniversary of women being allowed to apply for and get their own credit cards. Can you believe that?
Yes, I
50
can.
years.
My wife was the first woman in the state of Nebraska to get a mortgage without her husband having to sign.
Yeah. So it hasn't been that long. And so our experiences with managing money haven't been as long as men's experiences managing money. And the pattern that I've noticed is some women shy away from it and they use the excuse, I'm not good with numbers. Again, it's that discomfort. I don't really understand it. And so I'm gonna avoid it. And to me, that can be a real Achilles heel, because not understanding the numbers is what can cause you to go out of business. And so those would be the two things that I see as being areas that women need to lean into more in terms of how they run businesses. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations and get comfortable with the financial side of the business. And you can get coaches, advisors, guides to help you with both of those things.
Right, right. You it's interesting because on your website you talk about the fact that you love numbers,
Mhm.
and that numbers are really important to you. And of course, you also, proudly say that you were a high school dropout.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to ask you about that. Kind of what led you to do that, and it's played out beautifully.
Mhm.
I know other people who have dropped out of high school and have created very successful businesses. So education isn't necessarily the answer to everything, obviously. But it's interesting because usually, math is one of the areas that people have trouble with, which from an academic point of view may encourage that. But how did you develop your love of numbers, and has that high school issue, has that been a negative for you at all, or is it obviously it's been a positive now? How would that play out?
So I was always good in school. I was good at math. When I graduated from grade 8 into high school, I had the second highest math score in school. Uh, but when I finished grade 12, I was missing one credit to get my diploma, and I was going to grade 13 in Ontario. And I moved in with my dad that year and his wife and my two young sisters. And my dad and I hadn't grown up with my dad. My parents split up when I was 4. So there was a lot of conflict between myself and my dad. My dad wasn't really familiar with my study habits as a student. And so one day he made an offhanded comment to me that I didn't have what it took to go to university. And I decided to be a bratty young woman at one point. And the night before I was supposed to go for the night before I was supposed to write some exams, I declared that I agreed with him. I didn't have what it took. I was dropping out of school and I was going to get a job. And my dad didn't try to stop me.
Mm,
And
wow.
so if in that moment he had said, don't you be ridiculous, you get downstairs and study, you are going to university, I probably would have went back downstairs and kept studying and gone to university. But there were a couple things at play. My dad was being posted and he was leaving the city that I was living in before I finished the school year. And so I was worried about where was I going to land. I was not moving to Newfoundland. I wanted to stay in the city where I was in Ottawa. And so in my mind, if it was to be, it was up to me. I needed money to be able to survive. So, in my mind, I'm thinking I need a job because I needed enough money to get an apartment so I can stay here. And then the second thing that was at play for me is in Canada at that time, you could only get OSAP, which is the Ontario Student Assistance Program for financial help, if your parents made a certain amount of money. And when I lived with my mom, I qualified for OSAP. But the minute I moved in with my dad, my qualification for OSAP went away. And my dad wasn't going to pay for my university. My
Mm,
dad's rule was whatever you save, I'll contribute towards. But if you take stuff out for things like, I don't know, clothing, things that are not related to school, I'm going to take that money out too. So as an 18-year-old young woman, I'm thinking this is a lose-lose proposition. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be homeless on the street. So when I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher told my mom at the age of 5, she said, you could put Lisa out in the world by herself right now and she would survive. I think
what was
that's
that
just
about? What was that about?
I have no idea. I just was a resilient kid, right? Like I was gonna figure stuff out. And if you look at my history as a when I was 12 years old, I started my first little business selling stuff at the flea market because I wanted to buy jeans and my mom couldn't afford it. So I think there's just this thing in me that if I know I want something or I don't want something, I'm going to do what I need to do to make that happen. And so when I quit high school, when I dropped out, my intention was to go back in the fall and finish and then go on with my post-secondary education. But I got a job in retail. And turns out I was really good at retail.
Mm.
And I ended up getting promoted that year. And I was making more money in retail at the age of 19 than my mom had ever made in her life. So I think I've just, I've won the jackpot. I'm doing great. Who needs school? I'm doing better than my mom has ever done. I'm going to ride this train and keep going, which I did. And I grew my career working in retail and then eventually the wireless industry in retail.
Right. How did you, so we were talking earlier about women leaders and leaders in corporations versus entrepreneurship. Did you get tired then of your corporate work, and did that lead you to think about going out on your own?
What happened is I encountered a glass ceiling because I was a high school dropout.
Okay.
And in order for me to continue to further my career, I was going to have to further my education or I was going to have to move to a city that I didn't want to move to. And when I asked my VP at the time about the company paying for me to go for an executive MBA or paying for part of an executive MBA, they said no.
Mm.
And so I knew then that I was at a little bit of a stalemate, at least with that organization. I knew deep down that I always wanted to run my own business. And so that was really why I ended up leaving there and starting my own business. I mean, my husband and I had small businesses on the side before I did that. And I remember coming home one night. I'd gone to talk to all these different executives about where I was going to go next in my career. And I talked to a colleague of mine and he said, you should open a dealership, open a TELUS dealership. I mean, out of anyone, you know more about running a TELUS store than anybody else. Like, how could you lose? So I came home and I said to my husband, Mark thinks that we should open a TELUS dealership. And he looked at me and he goes, that's a great idea. Let's do it.
That's great. How'd that turn out?
Good, good. I sat on it for about 30 days. And then my husband said to me, so what's going on? Did you follow up on that? I'm like, no. So I sent the email to the guy and told him where I wanted to open the store. And he said, oh, you should have emailed me a week earlier. The RFP for that closes on Friday.
Oh man.
So again, the little 5-year-old who's going to survive in the world said, well, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to go to my VP and I'm going to tell him this is what I want to do. And I have been with this company for almost a decade. I have been responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. I'm going to ask them to extend the RFP for me.
I
And
love
so
that.
they did.
That is so great.
And I wrote my business plan and I asked for a whole bunch of things that this other guy said you're never going to get, but I asked for it anyways. And sure enough, we were awarded the dealership and I got everything that I asked for in the deal. That went well until the market started to get saturated with other players. And then they changed the compensation program for dealers. And I realized that owning a dealership meant that I was not in control of my income because someone else could make changes that impacted me financially. I wanted to have a business that was just 100, I could 100% rely on me to get the outcomes that I wanted. And so in 2012, we sold that business and I went full time into the business that I have today. I had been an absentee business owner for 2 to 3 years before I did that. And I knew because I was in the wireless industry that it was just a matter of time before people started stealing my inventory and my business was going to go downhill. So I knew I needed to get out when the going was good.
It's interesting. We had a similar situation with our business, which was healthcare, and then when managed care started to come in, we started to see our rates go down. When you have other people making decisions for you, it's very difficult, and that was
Yeah.
when we moved to sell our business as well. So, when you think about, so that in my work, Lisa, I'm very interested in not so much styles of leaders, but competencies of leaders. What are the skills associated with it? And you've identified a couple already that I would say you've talked about. One is having difficult conversations, challenging the status quo,
Mhm.
um, um, asking for what you want. What are some of the what are some of the other qualities that you would want to see, skills that you would want to see or expect to see, or you think women, perhaps men as well, need to have to take that leap into entrepreneurship?
Well, I think in order to take the leap into entrepreneurship, you need to be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Mm,
Because when you are moving from a job, you have guardrails and you have a regular paycheck. And when you move into entrepreneurship, you essentially need to go out and hunt and kill and bring your food back, right? Somebody isn't doing it for you. And that can be really uncomfortable for people. Marketing their business can be uncomfortable. Selling can be uncomfortable. And so I think you have to first master the art of being comfortable with the uncomfortable.
mm,
I also think that an important competency is learning how to sell. A lot of people really struggle to build a business because they don't know how to sell. And I always say selling isn't telling. Selling is helping someone make a buying decision. And you have to learn how to have skillful conversations with people and communicate in a way that helps them to make a buying decision. Because if you're always trying to force your services or products on people, people don't want to be sold. People want to buy. And
mm,
so learning how to sell would be another one. And then I think the third one would be, and there's kind of two sides to this, um, knowing when to act and knowing when not to. So
mm,
I think sometimes if I think about my own mistakes in leadership, when I look back at my own journey as an entrepreneur, the things that I regret the most are times when I acted too fast. I said something too quickly without getting all the information I needed, or I didn't act soon enough. And so I think really being mindful of when to slow down and when to speed up.
I love those, and in the model that I use, we have names for that, like managing ambiguity, being resilient,
Mhm.
managing decision making, thoughtfulness, those kinds of things. Um, I also think that your team did a great job of designing my website,
Mhm.
richardcitrin.com, and I was very excited to work with you, and I think a large part of the excitement that I had was around your creative energy, your creative thinking. Um, and on your website, Lisa, you talk a lot, and I love on your about page, which most people have, their bio, which you have at the bottom. You say, "Oh, it's all, this page is about me, but it's actually not about me. It's about you." And so I love that concept from the first time I saw it. Can you talk a little bit about about your creativity? Because all the things that you've talked about, and you talked about your friend who emphasized people's positives, I refer to as strengths, as targeting
Mhm.
people's strengths. And strengths are made up of talents, what you're naturally born with, two, skills, what you learn in school, for example, and
Mhm.
three, experiences. So what you've, selling cell phones, for example, and learning the marketing piece. Can you talk a little bit about creativity and where that comes from you and how that connects to the customer?
Yeah, for the longest time, I used to say I wasn't creative. I didn't actually think I was creative. And I think that was a story I told myself because the one credit that I'm missing that prevents me from having a high school diploma is art. And so I realized I call creativity strategy. To me,
Mm,
strategy is about figuring out the best way to shorten the distance to help somebody to get to where they want to be. And I think one of my strengths is I can see the potential in people that they may not see for themselves. And I can see how to position and package that and bring it to life for someone. And it's just something I innately know how to do. I can't tell you that there was a course or anything that I did that helped me hone that skill. I think it's a talent that I have. And I do think that creativity and strategic thinking is really important in entrepreneurship. And I think that people need to find quiet time to ignite their creativity. Too often we're heads down, we're working, working, working. We're distracted by our phones, and we don't spend enough time thinking. We
Hmm.
don't spend enough time going to a conference to learn something new and capture our ideas and insights. Even reading, when I talk about the way you should read a book, is you're reading a book with two sides of your brain. To me, one, you're reading to learn the information, but two, you're reading to mastermind with the author and get ideas and insights that you can apply to your business. I don't know that people, I think lots of people have those creative insights. I think the challenge is they don't act on them. They don't do anything with those ideas. And so I actually blogged about this, and the blog is called Dancing with the Idea Fairy. And the concept comes from Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. When ideas start to knock at your door in your mind, and you get excited about them, if you don't actually do something with them, that idea fairy that's knocking at your door is going to go knock at somebody else's door. And then one day you're walking down the street and you're like, oh my God, they stole my idea. Well, they didn't steal your idea. You didn't do anything with the idea.
Yeah, I got it.
And so I do think creativity is important. And if you are an entrepreneur that is maybe blocked by creativity, it's a good idea to work with a coach or a business advisor who can help stimulate that creativity for you. I know I had a client that was feeling very stuck and not super happy in their business. And they spent a day with me working on strategy. And what I had them do is I had them answer this question. I want you to assume I'm going to give you $200,000 and you need to restart your business. You're not allowed to hire any of the employees you have today, and you're not allowed to have any of the customers you have today. How are you going to reinvent your business to make it better than it is right now? And
Hmm.
by prompting those questions and giving them money that they could use, like imaginary money, all of a sudden the ideas that came and the excitement and the spark and the energy was amazing. It completely transformed their business and put them back on the path of being super excited about their business, because then we were able to translate those ideas into, okay, how can you actually take those ideas and do them in your business right now? Too often we bump up against resistance, and we rationalize why we can't do something. Oh, I can't do that. My customers won't pay more. Oh, I can't do that. I can't afford to hire somebody else. Oh, I can't do that. They'll never hire me for that. And so we bump up against these things and we don't actually move forward when really we need to try.
I love that. That's so great, and I love your thought readership project. You were talking about how you approach readers. As you know, my wife is an artist,
Mhm.
and she's just releasing her new book, The Art of Grieving, where she talks about how we use the arts in grieving, which we already do. You know, we
Mhm.
tell stories about our experiences, we sing songs, we play music, we look at photographs. All of these things are art. And I think your observation about not being able to, what I refer to as owning that skill, owning your creativity, owning your strategic ability, is a big factor in, I think, holding ourselves back. And the more we can kind of acknowledge that, yeah, you know, I'm not a professional painter, I'm not a professional doodler, I'm not a professional. I took a calligraphy class a couple of months ago. It was great.
Mhm.
And I've got my calligraphy material over here, and I'm not very good, but when I shared, I calligraphed a card for my wife for Valentine's Day, and I posted it on Facebook after I gave it to her. Everyone went, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" I thought it sucked, but
Yeah.
everybody was blown away by it. So,
Yeah.
that's so important and
You
powerful.
know, there's a woman, her name is Joanne Lozon, and I think she's actually going to do one of these Ask Me Anythings. And she is a talented artist, and I've known her for years. And I watched an Instagram story that she did, or a reel that she did a few years ago. And at that particular time, it was during COVID, and I was feeling a little bit stressed about what was going on in the world, and I wanted a bit of an outlet. So I decided, after watching one of her videos, to buy an easel and buy canvas and buy some paint. And she inspired me because she said, I want you to start by creating the ugliest piece of art you can.
Right?
Just create the worst thing you ever could. And I was like, oh, how freeing is that? There's no expectation. And when
Yes.
there's no expectation, you can kind of let that creative spark go. And I think that, whether you're grieving, whether you're depressed, whether you're feeling burnt out, like I think that art can really help you tap into that creative part of you again.
That's great. I'm so glad you're exploring that. So I know your husband Paul's been involved with you in business all these years. Paul is a great guy. When Sheila and I co-ran our business, we usually debriefed in the hot tub with a glass of wine. How do you guys keep your balance? How do you debrief? How do you talk about things? What's that like in your marriage?
It's probably the same as you. Where I mean, we're not jumping in the hot tub, but it's probably unwinding at the end of the day with a glass of wine. Or sometimes we'll go for a walk at the end of the day. Like I usually reset at the end of the day when I'm done my work day. I take the dogs for a short walk, and Paul will often come with me, and we'll just kind of talk about what's gone on during the day. Sometimes we'll go out for dinner, and we'll just kind of talk about different things. I will say, because this business was started by me and he joined me in the business later after selling, a couple of his businesses, he really doesn't try to control the direction of the business. He never tells me what I should do,
Mhm.
unless it's a supportive thing. So if it's a difficult decision that I'm grappling with, he'll never tell me you need to do that. But if it's an exciting thing that I'm like, oh, I think I want to try this, he will always encourage me to do that. So there's a level of support and respect there to not push me to do things that I'm not ready to do, but to encourage me to do the things that I want to do.
I love that. That's great. That's great. Okay, I got a business question, and I want to do some rapid fire questions with you.
Okay.
So I want to talk to you. I want to ask you about how AI is affecting your business and what you think about it. The truth of it is that I asked ChatGPT to give me some questions, responding to the prompt. What should I ask Lisa Larter on her Ask Me Anything podcast? So several of these questions came from ChatGPT, not all of them, but some of them. How's AI affecting your business, and what are your thoughts about it for women and men entrepreneurs and business people in general?
I think AI today is what social media was to us in 2007. It's going to completely change the way we do business. And we are using AI tools right now. I would say we're probably using the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're recording this podcast. I've got two different types of AI recording because I'm comparing what does a better job of transcribing and note taking. We're using another tool called Cast Magic that we run the podcast through, and it helps us with editing. It helps us with show notes. It helps us to develop SEO questions. We use ChatGPT. I use Claude AI in order to help get ideation for things. I don't use ChatGPT or AI to write for me, but what I'll do is I'll get it to write prompts for me. Um, and so I think we're just at the very beginning of learning. I was at a conference last week, and there was someone there who, has a business helping people with AI. And I'm very interested in learning what parts of my business can be utilized with AI that don't require a human. I think that there are certain things, for example, if you use Claude.ai, you could upload the manuscript to your book into Claude.ai, and you could ask it to generate, X number of social media posts for you written in your voice. And Claude.ai is more I'm going to give the wrong words here, but it's like closed source instead of open source. Whereas if you upload your manuscript to ChatGPT, it's basically on the open network now.
Right.
So I think it's important that people understand where the information is going, and that we're also mindful of the fact that if your book is in the public domain, it's already probably on ChatGPT. So,
Mm.
figuring out how you can use the tool to help you get your thought leadership out in a bigger way, I think is an important part when it comes to marketing. I have colleagues, I have not done this yet, but I have colleagues that say it is a brilliant tool for proposal writing. But I think that when you're using AI, and I'm talking about ChatGPT right now, and there's lots of other ways that you can use AI. It's, the AI is the tool is only as good as the input. If you don't ask good prompts, if you don't, go deeper, if you don't ask it to try again, then garbage in is going to equal garbage out. And so I think AI is going to change the world in a big way. I know there's a lot of people out there that have fear around that. I don't think AI is smart. It's not creative. It's going to give you what is already there. It's not, I don't think it's creating for the future. So I think, you're still going to need coaches and consultants and advisors because people are going to crave that human factor. It's no different than coming out of COVID. Everybody feels like they have Zoom fatigue. They want to get back in person, face to face, belly to belly, heart to heart. We're going to go through this phase where everybody is like AI, AI, AI. And then we're going to be like, you know what? I really miss connection. I really miss being with people. I want to have a conversation with a human, not with a chat bot on my computer.
Yeah, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday or earlier this week about AI and about mental health bots.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to serve a purpose for resourcing, but probably not going to, really provide a therapeutic kind of relationship because people, as you said, want
Mm-hmm.
that human contact. We're still, I'm a big believer that our recovery from COVID is going to be a 10-year project. We're not done with it.
Mm-hmm.
We see the effects of it in schools,
Mm-hmm.
in the workplace. We haven't got that all figured out quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's do some rapid fire questions for Ask Me Anything with
All
Lisa
right,
Larter.
let's go.
Okay, what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Uh, Stop charging by the hour.
Okay, what is the one thing you wish you had known when you started your career?
And by the way, that was from Michael Hughes many, many, many years ago. He pulled me aside and said, okay, it's time for you to stop charging by the hour. So I want to give credit where credit is due.
Okay, very good.
Can you ask that second question again? I'm
Yeah, what's
sorry.
the one thing you wish you had known when you started your career?
That I could start a business sooner.
Uh, Lisa, what strategies do you use to maintain a positive outlook?
I and I write cards to people all the time. I have a notepad on my desk, and anytime I see something and I want to acknowledge something or someone for that thing, I write their name down and I write the reason why. And I send out stacks of cards every single week, and that helps me to keep a positive mindset. The other thing that I do if I'm going through a rough period is I will write in my day timer, because I still have a paper day timer where I write stuff down on a scale of 1 to 10, how good my day was. And I will write down why it was good or bad, because I feel like sometimes we can catastrophize. We can have a bad couple of days, and then all of a sudden we think our business is awful. And so by doing it on a daily basis, it helps me to really remember how much good is really happening in my business. And then I practice gratitude. I'm always grateful for the good things that happen in my life. And I have faith. And when I pray for something good to happen and it happens, I'm always quick to also acknowledge that.
Well, I have some more questions here, but I think that's the perfect question to end on.
Okay.
So, Lisa, I want to thank you for this wonderful opportunity to interview you, and I will turn it back over to you because it's the Lisa Larter podcast.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for asking great questions. And, thank you for being a guest not too long ago. It was fun to have you on the show. And for those of you listening, you can find Richard at richardcitrin.com. I hope you've learned some nuggets from all of his great questions today. And stick around, and we'll see you on next week's edition of She Talks Business. Bye for now.